I'm Dawn Hill, host of Heart, Mind, and Purpose, a podcast where we explore what it means to live an aligned and wholehearted life. I am a professional counselor with over 25 years of experience and a deep love for meaningful conversation. I bring you honest reflections, soulful questions, and meaningful tools for managing life. Whether you're seeking clarity, connection, or simply a space to breathe, this podcast is here for you. Tune in weekly and join me on the journey.
Welcome to Heart, Mind, and Purpose, the podcast where we explore how our inner lives shape the way we love, connect, and grow. Hi, this is Paul Gramercy, producer of today's episode, where Dawn takes us into a question that many people quietly carry. How do healthy relationships actually work? What does it feel like to be with safe people? And how can we tell the difference between relationships that nourish us and ones that leave us drained? The conversation looks at emotional awareness, communication, boundaries, trust, and the kind of safety that allows relationships to grow with honesty, respect, and grace. Now here's your host, Dawn Hill.
Welcome back to Heart, Mind, and Purpose. Today we're talking about something I think a lot of people quietly wonder about, even if they don't always know how to put it into words. And that is, how do healthy relationships actually work? What do they really look like? What do they feel like? And maybe just as importantly, how do you know when a relationship is healthy versus when it is simply familiar, draining, confusing, or hard? Because the truth is, many people were never really taught this. We may have grown up learning how to keep the peace, how to perform, how to tolerate, how to stay connected at all costs, but we were not always taught how to recognize emotional safety, mutual respect, healthy communication, or what it feels like to be with someone who is actually good for our soul. So today I want to talk about healthy relationships in a very practical and a very human way. We're going to talk about emotional awareness, why so many people suppress emotions, what healthy relationships tend to have in common, and why some relationships can leave us feeling calm and connected, while others leave us feeling anxious, exhausted, or invisible. So let's get started. You may be wondering why relationship clarity matters. Well, in every relationship, it matters how we treat one another, whether it's romantic, platonic, family, intimate, or even a close working relationship. Healthy connection should include respect, honesty, and some degree of joy. It should not constantly leave you feeling drained, overwhelmed, confused, or like you are disappearing. And that doesn't mean healthy relationships are perfect. They are not. They still have misunderstandings, they still have differences, and they require effort. But healthy relationships tend to support emotional and social well-being, while unhealthy ones tend to slowly erode it. And that distinction matters, because sometimes people think, well, this relationship is hard, but all relationships are hard. You might notice in small moments. Maybe you're driving home after spending time with someone, and instead of feeling settled, you feel tense. You replay the conversation, and you wonder if you said something wrong, and you feel a little on edge even though nothing big happened. Or maybe you're sitting across from someone and you find yourself choosing your words very carefully. Not because you want to be thoughtful, but because you're trying not to trigger a reaction. That is often your body picking up on something even before your mind has the words for it. And yes, relationships do take work. But there is a difference between a relationship that requires effort and a relationship that regularly costs you your peace, your voice, or your sense of self. When a relationship is healthy, there are usually some consistent qualities present, not all at once, not perfectly, but over time. Healthy relationships tend to have most of the following things in common. First, communication. Both people express thoughts, feelings, opinions, and concerns. Even if the conversation is difficult, there is room for honesty. Number 2, boundaries. There is respect for physical, emotional, mental, and relational limits. You are allowed to have preferences, needs, and lines that matter. And number 3, consent. And I want to say this clearly, consent matters in all relationships. Consent is not just about sexuality. It is about respecting another person's body, their time, their energy, their space, and their life. It means there is no coercion, no pressure, no manipulation, or no power plays to get what someone wants. Then number 4, there is trust, and trust is earned. It grows over time through reliability, honesty with emotional safety, and follow-through. And number 5, honesty. There is space to tell the truth without fear of punishment, ridicule, or emotional retaliation. Number 6, independence. Healthy relationships allow for individuality. You can have your own thoughts, interests, friends, callings, and time alone. And number 7, equality. Each person has value, each person matters, and each person gets a voice. Number 8, support. There is compassion and empathy. The relationship does not revolve around one person's needs all the time. Number 9, responsibility. When mistakes happen, and they will, healthy people are willing to own their part, apologize, and then work towards repair. Number 10, healthy conflict. Conflict is not a sign of a failed relationship. How conflict is handled tells us much more than the conflict itself. Number 11, safety. This is foundational. If you do not feel emotionally or physically safe, then the relationship cannot truly become healthy. And number 12, fun. And this matters too. Healthy relationships are not only serious and responsible, there should be enjoyment, lightness, and moments that nourish our life. I know that's a lot of words, but if I had to put it all together in a simple way, I would say it this way. Healthy relationships are relationships where people can be honest, safe, respected, and real. Now, one of the reasons relationships can feel so confusing is because many people have never really developed what we might call emotional literacy. And emotional literacy is simply the ability to notice, name, understand, and communicate what we are really feeling. And this is a big deal in relationships, because if I don't know what I'm feeling, I can't explain it clearly. And if I can't explain it clearly, I may react instead of responding. And if I react instead of responding, the relationship can become quickly confusing for both people. Healthy emotional awareness sounds like things like, I feel hurt, I feel dismissed, I feel anxious, I feel unseen, I feel overwhelmed, I need some time to think, I want to stay connected, but I need to slow this conversation down. Emotional literacy can look very simple in real life. Instead of saying, you never listened to me, it might sound like, I felt dismissed when I was talking earlier. Or instead of shutting down, it may sound like, I'm getting overwhelmed right now. Can we slow this down for a minute, or can we take a break? That kind of language doesn't escalate things. It creates clarity. It helps us know what is happening inside us, and it gives the other person something real to respond to. Without emotional literacy, people often resort to blame, shut down, defensiveness, or passive-aggressive behavior instead. And this is when a relationship can become draining very quickly. So why do so many people suppress emotions in the first place? There are a lot of reasons, and here are a few. Sometimes people grew up in homes where emotions were dismissed, criticized, mocked, or even treated as inconvenience. Sometimes expressing feelings led to conflict, punishment, rejection, or shame. And sometimes people learned that being easy, low maintenance, or strong was the safest way to stay connected. And over time, people can get very skilled at not feeling what they feel. They disconnect, they numb out, they minimize their feelings, and they overfunction or they intellectualize everything. They smile while quietly hurting, and they say fine when they are anything but fine. The problem is that suppressed emotions do not disappear, and they usually come out sideways later on, through resentment, or through anxiety, through emotional distance, or through irritability, through burnout, or through choosing relationships that feel familiar rather than healthy. And that's another reason relationship clarity is so important, because some people do not move toward what is healthy, they move towards what is familiar. And familiar is not always the same as safe. And this brings us to the heart of this episode. What do safe people actually feel like? Safe people usually feel calming, not chronically activating, which means that you're not constantly bracing for criticism, mixed signals, withdrawal, or emotional punishment. There's respect. That means they don't demean you, belittle you, shame you, or mock your needs. They are consistent. That means they do not keep you guessing all the time. They are curious. They want to understand, not just win. They have boundaries. That means they respect your no. They do not pressure, manipulate, or override your limits. There's honesty. They tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. There is responsibility. That means they can acknowledge when they are wrong without turning it back on you. They are supportive, which means they are able to celebrate your growth, your gifts, your calling, and your healing. Finally, they are emotionally spacious. That means there's room for your feelings. Not every emotion has to be cleaned up immediately or judged as too much. And one of the simplest ways to say this might be, safe people make it easier for you to stay connected to yourself while being connected to them. That is so different from draining relationships, because draining relationships often require you to abandon yourself in order to keep the connection. So what is the difference between a healthy relationship and a draining one? A draining relationship may not always be openly abusive, but it often leaves you feeling depleted. A draining relationship might look like this. You try to bring something up, and the response is, well, you do that too, or you're too sensitive, or that's not what happened. And suddenly the conversation shifts. Now you're defending yourself, explaining yourself, or even questioning your own experience. And you leave feeling more confused than when you started. And also you may feel at different times any of the following: burned out after interactions, anxious before conversations, invisible or unheard, emotionally off balance, responsible for caring for the relationship, pressured to change who you are, afraid to speak honestly, or like you're always managing the other person's reactions. You may notice the relationship feels unequal. Maybe one person gives and the other one mostly takes. Maybe one person is always doing the emotional labor. Or maybe one person apologizes and reflects while the other one deflects and blames. Over time, that kind of dynamic wears people down. On the other hand, healthy relationships do not leave you feeling perfect, but they do tend to leave you feeling more grounded, more respected, and more able to be yourself. You do not have to be quote-unquote on all the time. You do not have to hide your humanity. You can be vulnerable. You can be honest. You can disagree, and the relationship can still hold. That is a very important difference. Now, I want to say something here because often people swing too far in one direction or the other. Some people say, if a relationship is healthy, it should be just easy. Others say the best relationships are just hard work. And honestly, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. Healthy relationships are not effortless, but they are also not meant to be relentlessly depleting. They do require effort, dedication, forgiveness, communication, and self-reflection. But the effort is usually toward growth, repair, understanding, and teamwork, not towards surviving constant chaos, disrespect, control, or emotional confusion. Healthy relationships may go through hard seasons, but there is a shared willingness to work together, and that matters because one-sided effort cannot create mutual health. Over time, healthy relationships tend to show certain signs. There is respect, trust is growing and being earned, communication can happen, especially when life gets hard, and there is room to disagree without contempt. Forgiveness is possible, both people are invested, there is kindness, there is support for each other's goals, decisions can be made together, difficult conversations are not endlessly avoided, each person is allowed to have an identity, and there is comfort in simply being human with each other. You can be tired, you can be imperfect, and you can have had a hard day, and you can let your guard down. That kind of relationship becomes a place of refuge, not just responsibility. I think it's important to say this. When we talk about healthy relationships, we are not only evaluating other people, we're also invited to ask ourselves some of these questions. Am I open? Am I being honest? Do I communicate clearly? Can I own when I've hurt someone? Do I respect boundaries? Do I make space for another person's feelings? Can I stay curious when we disagree? Because healthy relationships begin in part with becoming a healthier person individually, not a perfect person, just a healthier one. So when someone is growing in emotional awareness, humility, honesty, and kindness, that kind of inner work changes the quality of our relationships over time. Here's a few simple questions you might ask yourself in moments of quiet reflection. You might ask, do I feel safe in this relationship? Can I be myself here? Can I tell the truth? Do I feel heard? Do we respect each other's boundaries? Is there mutual effort? Do I feel better with this person in my life? Can we handle conflict without contempt? Is my trust growing? Is this relationship helping me grow or constantly shrinking me? Those questions can be very clarifying, not because every answer has to be perfect, but because they help us notice what is real. You may not be able to change every relationship overnight, but you can begin to notice, where do I feel more like myself, or where do I feel like I have to shrink or perform? Because those patterns tell a story, and that story can guide you towards relationships that are not just familiar, but truly healthy. And so healthy relationships do not work because two people never disappoint each other. They work because there is trust, honesty, respect, emotional awareness, boundaries, responsibility, support, and a willingness to repair. They work because there is safety. And healthy relationships are not only something we look for in others, they're also something we learn to build through self-awareness, communication, and courage to tell the truth about what helps us flourish and what leaves us depleted. So maybe that is the question to carry with you this week. What do my relationships feel like? Do they help me stay connected to what is true, healthy, and whole, or do they leave me drained, confused, and far away from myself? Because healthy relationships may not be perfect, but they do make room for respect, truth, growth, and peace, and that is something to pay attention to. Thank you for spending time with me today on Heart, Mind, and Purpose. If this episode resonated with you, maybe share it with a friend or a spouse or someone who has been trying to make sense of what healthy connection really looks like. Until next time, may you be kind to your heart, clear in your mind, and grounded in your purpose. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for joining us for Heart, Mind, and Purpose. If this episode helped put words to something you've been feeling in your own relationships, we hope you'll share it with someone who may need it too. You can find resources and listener handouts at dawnmariehill.com/heart. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode as we keep exploring how the heart, the mind, and our sense of purpose all work together for a life well lived. If you have questions or comments, please contact Dawn at heartmindandpurpose.podcast@gmail.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.